Welcome back to the X podcast. I am at the round table here with Zachary Brown.
Hello.
How are you?
Fantastic.
Are you fantastic? I don't think you're fantastic.
I am fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's been a fun day.
on God, you're fantastic.
On God.
Okay. Is that still a thing?
No.
Okay. You look like serious business. You got the MacBook up here, responding to some emails.
Dude, we're ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't know when this will come out, but you are about a week or two away from being away.
Yes. Father, baby boy on the way. This
Yeah.
is super exciting.
No longer a girl dad.
No longer
You
a
said
girl
you're
dad.
going to throw away the shirt.
That shirt has been a lot of appearances on this podcast.
It has.
By the way.
Yeah, fun fact, you were on a podcast here a year or two ago with the girl dad shirt.
Yeah.
PT made a joke about it. I may have made a joke about it. You had a friend comment that was toxic masculinity.
Yes.
That you were having to endure.
Yes.
From me and PT. So
Yes.
I don't
You don't get
I
it.
don't understand, but
Yeah. Such
you
is
know,
life.
such is life.
But yeah, boy on the way.
Okay.
Super excited.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you the name until everyone knows the name. We're keeping it a secret.
What's the first letter?
You can guess if you want to.
No, what's the first letter?
No.
Okay.
Just smile. I'll smile if you guess it right.
It starts with an S then.
No.
Does it start with an S?
No.
Z? F? T? M? A? B? D?
No.
C? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, so
But yeah, super excited.
I feel like the Brown family grows by the month. Maybe it's more like the year. Is this, how many y'all have now? Is this
This is
4?
number 4.
How many more are you going to have?
Unless it's like a act of God.
Okay. So an oops, a divine oops.
Divine. That's what the kids are calling it these days.
I don't know.
Yeah. This will be it.
Wow.
4 for the
Big
Brown
family.
Well,
Well, you said for you two is all relative. For you two, that's normal.
I mean, I grew up in a family of 4, so
Okay,
like
okay.
that's what I'm used to.
Yeah.
Rebecca, she grew up in a family of 3, so
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we're that way. And to me, I'm like, once you get past 3, I mean, we're just adding another
Yeah,
one.
just another one that'll trail behind you. It is.
Yeah.
It is fun to watch the little brown girls toddle and
Yes.
waddle behind you. It is.
They don't all waddle.
No, only one waddles.
Oakley.
Right.
Oakley.
Yeah. Oakley waddles.
Yes.
Oakley waddles, and her facial expression never changes. It is. She is so cute.
I feel like everyone
and
needs
it's
to
so
see
fun
her.
to watch.
I feel like everyone needs to see her at home because at
Okay.
home she's like a completely different person.
Yeah.
I mean, she data doing all the time and is just a hot mess and
Yeah, she every time I see her has that cute, slightly open mouth, cartoonish, just like she's a cartoon character. Yes,
like I'm just
it is, and just
I taught her
she
that
seems
look.
perpetually surprised
Yeah,
and slightly concerned.
just she takes everything in.
Yes.
she's very like
She's absorbing it.
I'm here and I'm
Okay.
watching, maybe judging slightly
Yeah,
depending on everyone's behavior.
I can see that. It is. The summer has flown by.
I know. I can't believe it's August.
Yes, as we're
of
recording this,
it's August.
August 2nd, which is
Kids
crazy.
start school in 2 weeks. As of when
That's
we're recording.
nuts.
This. I feel like it's flown by.
It's flown by. Big
Yeah.
thing. 2 weekends ago, it was Barbenheimer weekend.
Which I still haven't seen either one of them yet.
Okay, which one are you going to see first?
So we're trying to work it out
Yeah.
before the baby comes to go on a date night. And if we go on a date night, we're going to see Barbie.
Okay.
So
this is a very
I-
nice husband of you. Or actually, I feel like you're excited about Barbie.
I'm not going to lie. When it first came out, I was like, this is going to be dumb. And I don't want to see it. But then as I saw previews and trailers for it, I was like, oh, this is actually more interesting than what I thought it was going to be. So I'm excited.
yeah.
I'm excited to see that. I do want to see Oppenheimer. I haven't seen it yet. Heard it's amazing.
Rebecca doesn't want to see it.
No, it's not her cup of tea when it comes to movies. She prefers.
Epic historical movie of the year. Just not her thing, huh?
I mean, it depends on the movie, but generally she likes more fun movies.
Choose your words wisely, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
We were watching Blended the other day.
Don't know what that means.
It's oh gosh, Drew Barrymore and who's the comedic actor? Adam Sandler. Drew Barrymore, Adam Sandler, and they're always together, and they always make comedic gold. And
Yeah.
it's a fun
Okay.
movie.
Well, to your point, I will say I was not going to see Barbie.
Yeah.
And then I heard Trey and Tucker around the office talking about how it's supposed to be so good. And of course, the cast is insane.
Right.
And, it was a cultural phenom. And so the night after I saw Oppenheimer, I went and saw Barbie, and it was surprisingly fun. I will say. Ryan Gosling is hilarious.
Did you have pictures of him?
No.
In your room growing up?
No, nope. I did not. Nope. I will keep it at that. I did not. I had pictures of Jennifer Love Hewitt and Bruce Lee, so that was about it.
Jennifer Love Hewitt.
Absolutely.
And Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee was my athletic idol.
Yeah.
Back in my martial arts days.
Probably
I love Jennifer Love Hewitt from. There's several movies she was in that I love. But anyways,
I'm probably not surprised you. I had pictures of Reggie White.
What does that mean? Oh, is that the football player?
The football player.
Okay, that does not surprise me.
He was called.
Are you going to try to make your son a football player?
This is a debate in our marriage right now.
Okay.
So we'll see. Yes,
Okay.
I would like for him to be a football player.
Mm-hmm.
If he wants to be.
Yeah.
If he doesn't want to be, I got the whole Lord of the Rings,
Knitting
Harry
and
Potter
Okay.
Side of my personality.
So he has to be the jock or a nerd.
Or he could be both.
Oh, or you both. Okay.
Because I'm both.
You are.
So
You are. You're a man of many mittens. All right. So it's been an interesting summer. It's been a fast-flying summer. It's been. They say Barbenheimer kind of was the injection to the theaters that they're hoping. Actually, which I feel like there's been a lot of great movies the last 3 years. So I think that's interesting. But that was the weekend that brought people back to the movies. They're saying it was,
I feel like there's been a lot of people who've gone back to the movies. So I'm like,
that's what I thought. But apparently that was the weekend that brought the most people back to the theaters since COVID. Was Barbenheimer.
Interesting.
And then did you?
I will
say,
I appreciate the fact that they were original.
Yes, very original.
A lot of movies I feel like now that come out are either remakes or they're continuations of franchises that were great in the 80s or 90s or to that, like it's another Marvel movie, another whatever. And I do feel like these were original movies. So I appreciated that.
And then, so it was weird. I saw 3 movies in a row. Saw Oppenheimer, then Barbie, and then Tommy and Paige invited me to go see Sound of Freedom. Did you see Sound of Freedom?
I did not.
You did not? Okay, you going to go see it?
Probably not.
Probably not? Well, why not?
I mean, my time is very limited.
Oh, okay.
And I can go see movies and do things like that. So if I'm going to pick between movies I want to go see.
But you really want to see it?
I mean.
All right. Okay. Well.
I do want to see it. If I had the chance, if someone gave me a free ticket to go see the movie, I would go.
Somebody gave you a free ticket, paid you $100, and said, "I'll maybe see your kids." Give you play on. Then you'd go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, great. Okay, so here's the other thing that this summer's been. It's been hot.
It's been so hot.
It's been really, really hot. Now, I rebuke people like you who, whether it's hot or not, want to speed past heaven and into fall, which here is a downward slope into misery of just bitter temperatures.
Yeah.
So I don't want to leave summer, but summer's been really, really hot.
Yeah.
We've mentioned this in a few former podcasts, but back in late spring, they predicted that the way climate is right now, the way weather patterns are right now, that in America, that the southern coastal states would see record high temperatures and that the middle of the country would see way more rain than usual.
Right.
And that has happened. What's been really weird, last night was the first night that, what was last night? No, Monday night was the first night that we didn't have a storm hit right in the middle of small group. My last 2 small groups, people had to wait behind because storms and tornadoes and like hail was like coming
down,
I had to grab, I need to reimburse the church because last Monday I grabbed an umbrella to finally walk out and face it. It snapped. It snapped halfway to the car. It was raining that hard. And it's been crazy. And then you, Mr. News Ned.
That's what they call me.
News Ned.
Only you call me that.
Maybe.
Yes.
Always are sending the latest to, we have a group text, me, you, and Pastor Tim. And I remember every day for like 11 days in a row, you were sending us the new record temps of whatever country or state. And so, you have any of that you sent us?
Yeah, I do, actually. So just to illustrate your point, this is as of, I think, the middle of July. July 18th. Okay, so Miami had gone 37 record-breaking consecutive days with a heat index of 100 degrees Fahrenheit or greater. El Paso, Texas, had already hit the 100-degree mark that day, and was forecasted to reach up to 110 degrees that afternoon, and that marks the 33rd consecutive day El Paso had topped the century mark. Phoenix, Arizona reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit on July 18th, and it stretched its streak of days at more than 110 degrees to a record 19 days. By the way, I just read last night that from July 18th to today, that every day has been over 110 degrees in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow.
It's been the hottest month of the year ever recorded in Phoenix, Arizona. Which, I mean, it's called the Valley of the Sun, so we know it's going to be hot, but it's crazy. I mean, this is nuts. The Persian Gulf International Airport weather station in southern Iran registered a heat index value, which is the apparent feels-like temperature to the human body of 152 degrees Fahrenheit. And this was recorded on July 18th, and it goes on to say heat indexes of 160 degrees Fahrenheit are widely considered the upper threshold of what humans can endure for any more than a few hours. As heat indexes climb to these thresholds, the human body feels strained. It can lose its ability to cool itself down. And right before we hopped on, I hopped on the news just to do a quick search and just see if there's any articles out. And what I just said, I just saw Iran declared, actually, 2 public holidays right now because of the heat, for people to like stay inside and stay out of the heat.
Oh my gosh,
that sort of thing.
Crazy. Well, what was it, about a month ago? We had our first U.S. heat-related death. I can't remember where. It's nuts. My dad just got back.
National parks. A lot of things have happened in national parks over the summer. So,
it's crazy, and so like all over the world, record temperatures.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like global record temperatures in the history of humanity are being set for heat all summer long, which begs the question: is global warming real? Yes or no? What do you say?
Well, I mean, certainly. I would say based on the facts and based on what's been happening, that the globe is getting warmer.
Are you concerned?
Yes.
Yeah.
I am concerned.
Yeah. So I think it was back. I wrote it down. In fact, PT maybe if I don't know if he's listening to podcasts while he's on sabbatical, but if so, he might have a little bit of FOMO because he's been wanting for a while to revisit this whole conversation around climate care, global warming. I looked at it. It was back in, where was it? I think it's episode 129. Yeah, episode 129 was the first one, if you want to go back, if this stuff interests you, where we talked about climate care and faith and how all that intersects. But with how insane this month has been, and people all over the world are feeling the effects of global warming, the effects of climate change, thought it was worth at least kind of dipping our toes back into a conversation around all those things. And so I bought a book, you bought it, and you're Mr. Overachiever. Zach is, I mean, I'm a reader. I've been reading my whole life. Reading's come very easy to me, but you are a speed demon when it comes to reading. But there is a book I've been reading. I know we have a number of listeners that actually say when we mention books, they buy them. So this is by Kyle Myers-Shop. Hopefully I'm saying that right. It's called Following Jesus in a Warming World.
Yeah.
And the tagline is a Christian call to climate action. It's very interesting.
I think it's supposed to be like cold to hot.
Is that it? Cold to hot. Is that the interesting
cold,
colors? Okay,
yeah.
Cold to hot.
Cold
Interesting.
To hot.
Yeah, so it's just, there's a lot of places we could go from this. But, one of the first is, I guess, we know the globe's warming.
Yeah. And real quick on that note, I have a stat I want to share with you.
Good.
Okay. So we know the world is warming, and I think sometimes people question how do we know? Like, sure, it's hot.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? This is from climate.gov. This is from the government. We know the world is warming because people have been recording daily high and low temperatures at thousands of weather stations worldwide over land and ocean for many decades, and in some locations for more than a century. And so when different teams of climate scientists in different agencies, so like NOAA or NASA and other countries, for example, UK Hadley Center, they average these data together, they all find essentially the same result, that Earth's average surface temperature has risen by about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880.
Yeah. Well, and so, yeah, I mean, I think we probably talked about this in episode 129. We could spend a whole few hours talking about this, but I mean, there are summits and announcements and meetings with scientists all over the world all the time, basically saying, hey, we need to sound the alarm.
Yeah.
Or, hey, we have got to reach this threshold. We have this amount of carbon dioxide. We have this amount of time before it crosses this threshold. And then a few months later, announcement, hey, we've crossed that threshold. Louder alarm bells, and it just keeps getting more and more and more. I mean, going all the way back to 2015, and there's a whole lot of narrative we could walk through with the Paris agreement, all those things. But right now, I mean, the warnings from scientists are pretty dire. And, an interesting phenomenon, because what I really want to talk about is where this intersects with faith, and why this is such an interesting, let's just be honest, probably the moment we mentioned following Jesus in a warming world is probably a trigger for some people.
It is.
Why that is. But first, I think it's important to really note that the quote-unquote debate around, because I don't think most people would deny now that the globe's warming. The debate comes in, are humans causing it? Is it a man-caused, a mankind-caused thing? And the interesting thing is, really around the world, it's not a debate.
No.
It's interesting. I was watching something. I think it was Greta Vanberg. She's this. You know what I'm talking about?
16-year-old girl.
Yes.
Yeah, who's like taking climate awareness to another level.
Yes. I was rewatching something like 2 years ago. She took I forget what the term is, but like a non-fuel powered boat from Sweden to New York City.
Yeah, to help raise awareness on
the
issue. Yes.
And she was on The Daily Show.
Yes.
And she basically, Trevor Noah asked, well, like, what's the biggest difference in, that you notice when it comes to the conversation around climate care from where you're from and around the world in America? And she goes, well, and you can tell she's trying to be polite, but she said, well, in America, it's debated. And in the rest of the world, it's known to be a fact. And, and it's just so interesting. Like, and I, a couple things that I underlined stuff in this book like crazy. Just going to read a few things that I thought were really, really interesting. Again, this is Kyle Meyer Sharp. He says, depending on the various methodologies used, scientists have found that anywhere from 90 to 100% of climate scientists agree that the climate is warming at an alarming rate, about 100 times faster than natural warming trends in the past, and that the primary cause is the extraction and burning of fossil fuels on an industrial scale. The average level of consensus across all these studies is 97%. What's more, the studies found that the higher the level of climate expertise among those surveyed, the higher the level of consensus on human-caused warming. In other words, a lot of times we'll ask somebody, because they're a scientist, what they think, and most scientists would agree with this, but sometimes you have this, rare rogue botanist that might not agree.
Yes.
And while a botanist's opinion matters, it doesn't matter as much as a scientist that actually studies climate.
Correct.
And then he goes on, and not to just bleed the stone here, but I just think some of this is really important. It says he's talking about how much this is important, and he says, yet research shows that even though 97% of climate scientists agree that climate change is real, that it's bad, and that it's us, the U.S. population remains largely in the dark about the scientific consensus on climate change. Only 59% of U.S. adults understand that scientists agree that global warming is happening, and only 24% know that the scientific consensus on climate change is over 90%. And it's all about this matters, because this matters how we create laws. It matters how we approach issues. It matters how we wade through misinformation. And then just one more line. I just thought this was kind of poignant. He said, scientists have been having their debate for over 150 years, and the results are in.
Yeah. It's crazy. I feel like it's so interesting when you look at the kind of culmination of all these studies and all these scientists and what they're saying, that it still is a debate.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of asks, for me, I start to ask myself, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
Why is this even a debate? Why are we having this conversation today about what it is? But yeah, it seems like every time you bring up global warming, everyone has an opinion on if it's real or if it's not real, the effects of it, why it's affecting us as a culture. So I'm curious. I mean, to start off with you, why do you think it's a bait?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. I think, one of the reasons we've talked about ad nauseum, which is that this is true for every country, okay? This is not just the U.S., but especially in the U.S., so much, especially over the last 50 to 60 years, has been absolutely politicized and polarized.
Okay.
So I think one of the reasons is political things. What's really interesting about this author is he kind of goes from the standpoint, like you might relate to some of this.
Comes from like a hyper-fundamentalist.
Christian homeschooled.
Background.
And he kind of jokes about how like growing up, like they had this like
mock election
when it was, what was it, Reagan and
no, it was George W. Bush versus Al Gore.
Al Gore,
2000.
yes.
Who, by the way, Al Gore's gone on to become one of the most well-known climate change advocates in the world. Anyways, go ahead.
So, anyways, he, basically talked about in the school, they had these mock debates around the time of the election. And the results came in at the end of the day, and it was, I think it was like 99%.
97.
Okay, mister. All right, thanks, Rain Man. 97% voted for George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And 3% voted for Reagan.
And everyone was like.
No, for Al Gore. And so he expected everybody to, you would think basically what he's describing, this ultra conservative, hyper fundamentalist schools, that everybody would just scream and cheer. But there was absolute deafening silence, and the reason was because people weren't focused on the fact that 97% voted for the Republican. It was deafeningly quiet because no one could comprehend that 3% could vote for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And it was like, wait, don't you know that Christians, and not to get all back into politics, not to get super back into the weeds of tribalism and echo chambers and binary thinking, but I think you can't have an honest conversation around climate change, or unfortunately almost any topic, without realizing that politics, unfortunately, shapes some of our science.
Yeah.
And shapes some of our views. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. And the author goes into gets into a lot of the fascinating data behind it. I think one of the reasons that it's so polarized and politicized has to do with money. He even talks about back from 1959, big tobacco, when we found out that it was absolutely clear that tobacco caused cancer.
Yeah.
Well, to combat that so that they wouldn't lose money, big tobacco hired a corps of quote unquote scientists to bring differing opinions and to dilute it so that it would look like, oh, it's a debate. Some scientists think this, others don't. And they literally, like, there was the internal tagline for one of the big tobacco companies was, doubt is our product.
Yeah.
And they knew that if we can sow seeds of doubt and create what looks like a balanced debate, well, these scientists say this, these say this, who really knows? Then it dilutes the urgency of what's actually obvious and to make a change.
Yeah.
And so basically there's just mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence that the exact same thing has happened when it comes to climate change. I mean, the coal industry, go ahead.
Well, for example, I actually have some stats here. So this is 2019. I'm pulling this. The U.S., $200 million a year was spent on lobbying to control, delay, or block binding climate policy. $200 million. And they actually break it down by, I think BP spent the most, and then Shell, then Exxon, then Chevron, and it goes on from there. But my point is, large amounts of money are being spent on these policies and trying to lobby and get their way. Now, make no mistake about it. Okay, when we're talking about coal, when we're talking about oil, let's go back to Industrial Revolution. A lot of the wealth and the success and a lot of the benefits of the modern society that we live in today have been provided for, and the reason we're able to do these things are because of these energy sources.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we're able to have electricity, the fact that we're able to, I mean, all the things we're able to do with our technology and where we're at, it's because it's been powered by these fossil fuels.
Yeah.
So there's, on the one hand, there's been, I think, an incredible benefit to our society and to our culture because of these things. In fact, the author talks about, remember when he went to West Virginia?
Yes,
and
that whole chapter was.
And so he met with people who were dealing with like black lung disease, and were dealing with all like the effects of working in the coal mines and different. But yet he sensed underneath kind of the external, like the grittiness and the hard work and the economic decline in West Virginia, the sense of pride that the people of the Appalachian region felt in, hey, we are America's power source.
Yes, we've powered America.
Yes. And so we've gotten to here. So I think, it's natural, I think, that there'd be a resistance.
Yeah, I think, it always goes back to, not to be get super like philosophical about it, but like there's got to be a way to honor the past, but then build towards the future, especially based on today's knowledge. Yeah. And so, and I think he does, in my view, he does a balanced job of walking through that tension of like, look, there's some things like, thank God that for a season in the history of the world, especially before we knew like all of the effects of some of this, that we used the knowledge we had to bring the power that we could have. Yeah. But once you get to a certain place where you can begin to, number one, invest in alternative fuel sources, once you get to a place where you have the knowledge of, holy crap, this is what we've done to our environment and this is what's about to happen at the rate we're going, once you get to a place where you know there's better ways to financially provide for families and to actually improve their health and their lungs, that it's a win-win-win-win if we can begin to look to the future with a different lens. Once you get to that place, it's like, okay, let's pivot. Let's honor the past, but be committed to the future. Yeah. And it's just really interesting. I don't know. It's tragic, but it's such a cultural thing. Yeah. And especially like what they're doing now, like even the stories of like strip mining.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's not just we're going to keep doing coal, but we're going to destroy the beautiful resources and flatten the tops of mountains for a minimal amount of extraction. And so, not to be all preachy. To be honest, like, even though this is something I've thought about a lot, I've mentioned this before, but my sister, huge when it comes to environmental care. Like, she started a nonprofit 20 years ago, and she's met with Cameron Diaz and all these people and so it's something that she really opened up my eyes to a long time ago. To be honest, I don't feel like let me say it this way. I'm probably a climate hypocrite because I don't want to sit here and pretend like I'm doing all these great things for it. We have some people like, shout out to Leah Russell, who are constantly like, all right, guys, what are we as a church, going to do? And Russ, what are you going to do? And those are things I still think about. But that's one of the reasons I bought the book is I was like, okay, we got a whole lot of things happening in the world. This is something that, I've had on my back burner for a while. I want to actually begin to truly educate myself. And I thought it was just fascinating from a Jesus perspective. And that's kind of where I want to go is why and maybe this is kind of where you're going. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was going to say was, to answer my original question as to why there's such a resistance, you talked about politics. I was going to talk about why in a faith context why maybe there's a resistance. Because that is our context. I know that a lot of people who listen to this, maybe you don't go to church or you don't have that background, but probably a majority of people who listen do have at least some sort of a faith context. Growing up, I remember singing the hymns, singing the songs. What's the old one? I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. Yep. So I think we've had this like perspective in our mind that has said, and even like growing up, like the way faith was taught to me, that God is coming to save me, me from my sins, so that I can go to heaven somewhere. And I think a lot of us in our minds, okay, let's just strip away kind of faith in Christianity. A lot of us, when our minds, when we think of heaven, we think of somewhere up in the clouds with the angels singing, and we're floating on the clouds somewhere, playing a harp, and that's our reality. Yeah. And so I think a lot of us have this perspective that eventually, whenever we die and whenever we go to heaven, whatever that is, it's not going to be here. Yeah. And so therefore, this earth where we're at, this rock spinning through space, is just a temporary home. What's the famous? I feel like there's a famous song line, something about just like passing through, or if you know it,
just passing through.
Yeah, just passing through. Like I feel like that is our mental map.
Yeah. So that's probably That's probably part of the answer of, if we're able to. I mean, part of the reason, we've tried not to be spicy in a while, but part of the whole point of this podcast, we have some lighthearted ones. We're probably going to get into conspiracy theories here at some point, but in general, we like to take at least a good portion of our podcast and say, okay, how can we think at a higher level? How can we challenge our thinking? How can we think? Orthopraxy would be a really, you know what that means, like a really fancy theological word, which basically means how do you practice your Christian faith in action in the world you live?
Yeah.
And so a lot of that kind of goes down to how you think through these things. And so, if we were to try to, for me and you, and for anybody listening, anybody watching, if we were to try to strip away political lens, the ways, because to be honest, again, I feel like growing up, if you start talking about environment, you're a tree-hugging liberal, right?
Yes.
So but understanding that we've all, unfortunately, on both the right and the left, been formed by echo chambers, formed by party lines, formed by tribalistic us versus them thinking, if we can have kind of the intellectual grit to strip that away for a second and just think, even science aside, if I'm a follower of Jesus, if you're a follower of Jesus, if the first command given to, Adam and Eve, if one of the first things that was given to them as an assignment was to steward and to rule and to care for God's creation. If God, like the author said, like 7 times in the original narrative said, it is good. Before human beings ever entered the scene, God created this world, delighted in it, declared over it, it's good, it's good, it's good. God took pleasure in creating every animal, took pleasure in creating every plant, took pleasure in creating the sun and the moon and the stars and the atmosphere, and then told mankind, I want you to care for it. And we have such a Western mindset, this divorced and everything's so fragmented, but in an Eastern culture, they would have understood everything's so interconnected.
Yeah.
I live today because I'm breathing oxygen that comes from trees, and we eat food that comes from the soil, and to understand scientifically and philosophically, we're so interconnected. And God created this world, this created order, and gave mankind the assignment to care for it and cultivate it. Why would followers of Jesus not actually be the most passionate people to care for creation, when really it seems that we're the least?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got a great answer for you.
You go ahead. I wrote down 4 potential answers.
Typical. One of the things is what I already mentioned, the I'll fly away mentality.
Yeah.
That just, we have, a perspective of one that says we're just here passing through. I think another one that at least I heard, I'm curious if this made your list, that God gave us these resources for us to use. So God put us here, and he gave us the gift of the earth and all these natural resources and plants and animals, and he said that we're supposed to rule over them, meaning like they're ours to use and kind of use up.
Yeah.
That's kind of been the mentality that I think I've seen and
at
least heard growing up.
Right, which is interesting because if somebody were to leave you in charge of their house and everything they ever designed that was precious to them, and say, I'm giving you charge to rule this and create this, you would probably put them in jail if you got back and they had destroyed your house and said, well, you told me to use it up. Right. If they demolished your walls and they spray painted your chandeliers and said, well, we thought that there could be something inside those chandeliers, so you'd probably put them in jail. And it's just weird that we don't think God cares about what he just so preciously, intricately created.
Yeah.
And I think the author does a good job of actually going back to the original Hebrew language, that the language that is used for to rule the earth was not one of just ripping and stripping. It was one of actually stewarding, caring.
Well, and servanthood, too.
Yeah, servanthood, yes.
Yes, like we are, I think the original Hebrew word for ruler almost implies a hint of slavery, almost like we are slaves and or servant, like in service to the ground, to the earth. And it's our job to rule, yes, to lead, yes. But we talk about this all the time. We talk about here at church, like what it means to have a value of servant leadership.
Yeah.
That the way we lead and steward and rule is by serving.
Yes.
And taking care of.
Yeah. If you're a leader in a church or a business or a home or whatever, your job is to lead by serving and caring. And why would it be any different when we're entrusted with resources, when we're entrusted with God's creation?
Yeah. So what are you for? I'm curious what you're for.
Oh, well, okay. So number 3 was the first one you said, which the whole I'll fly away was just fatalism.
Yeah.
I think I have a weird version of Christian fatalism, which this fatal, like, hey, I mean, look, I'm fly away, going to heaven one day, so who cares about the earth? And I'm just like, we don't apply that in any other theological way to our Christian faith.
Also, maybe you're going to get there.
Yeah.
Is that wise theological thinking?
No. Well, no, I can't think of any way. I don't think there's any instance in life in which fatalism is healthy. I don't think you should. I don't think you should look at your body. My body's going to decay one day. You keep telling me to eat healthy and to not abuse it and to exercise.
I'm going to get a new body one day.
Yeah,
so
I'm going to get a glorified body. So might as well treat this like crap.
Yeah.
We wouldn't do that with anything else. So why would we do that with God's creation?
Right.
Any level of God's creation.
Right.
So fatalism. God has invited us from day one to be a part of the restorative act. When Jesus came, it wasn't this is a whole nother theological thing, but in Colossians it talks about all things made for him, and he's in the process of restoring all things. Romans 1 talks about since the fall, the creation's been groaning, looking for liberation. It's something we don't talk a lot about, but what Jesus began when he came, and what Jesus is going to do when he brings the end of the age and the new heaven and new earth, is a restoration of all things, not just humanity, but a restoration of creation.
Right.
So I can't see, and I'm not going to say the name because this is a family member that I really love, but the reason that I was thinking about this conversation when it comes to fatalism is I was on the phone with a family member and talking about, man, it's been hot. And I was like, yeah, I should not have, but I made the joke. Yeah, global warming, am I right? And we don't care. And this person said, well, Russ, it's God's weather. And so if you're listening, I love you. But I just said, okay, yeah, it's God's creation that he gave us to steward. God's not the one destroying the weather.
Right.
He's given us, stewardship, and we've been destroying. There's a causation between our behavior and the current weather.
Yeah.
So one was fatalism. 2, we've already talked about it, but politicization. I just think it's increasingly harder and harder and harder in our country to think apart from political lens. And
in every area of life.
In every area of life. And, for so long now, and unfortunately we're still here. I thought it was fascinating. I don't know if you remember this part where Billy Graham, before he died, he gave a stark warning that the worst...
Oh, yeah. To Jerry Falwell.
To Jerry Falwell. He said the worst thing that could happen would be the marrying of the conservative right in Christianity.
Yeah.
And his own son, Franklin Graham, ignored that warning and is part of the 80s and 90s movement of kissing that marriage.
Sealing it and blessing it.
Sealing it and blessing it.
Yeah.
And I for 1,000 reasons that we've discussed, I won't go deep into, I do think that... And so, it's a still common kind of thought of like, well, Jesus is a Republican, and there's certain values that fall on the right and the left, and one of those values, for whatever reason, that does not fall on the right is environmentalism.
Right.
And so, it's easy just to be like, well, these are the 2 or 3 things that I care about, and that's over there for the liberal, hippie tree huggers, and that doesn't really, and economy is the most important thing in the world. So right now, if in the immediate, it's oil, then let's just dig.
Yeah.
And so I just think politicization and even just on an emotional level, on an identity level, he talks a lot about that. He goes deep into the tribalistic. There are a lot of people that would want to maybe open their minds a little bit more to that. But there is if you're a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, there's almost like a tribalistic identity cringe you almost feel at the thought of like breaking your party line and dipping an interest into something that would go against your quote-unquote team and what you hear on whatever radio show you listen to and news you read. This kind of like, I don't want to start talking like them.
Right.
And that goes both sides. Again, liberal and conservative.
For sure.
Both sides are like that.
Yes.
So yeah, politicization was another one. You have any thoughts you want to add to that?
No, other than just it's getting worse. I mean,
Yeah.
every stat you read, every study you read, I think the divide between both parties in America is just getting bigger. And it seems like it's funny, as I read more and as I listen to political science podcasts and different things like that, like it's like people are waiting for eventually something for the dam to break.
Yeah.
For there to be something that would bridge the gap and bring the parties back together. But it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast. One of the kind of late great Christian thinkers, at least in modern American times, Tim Keller, who recently passed away. Great, incredible pastor. I encourage you to look up his books. Very fundamental to.
A lot of people say he was modern day C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, he. I was listening to a podcast. One of his last ones he ever did before he passed away. And he actually said that he's afraid that we've reached a point here in America where we've reached plurality, meaning we're so, at this point, there's two diverging paths of thought, ideology here in America for what is best for us in the future of our country. And he wasn't sure those are going to be able to be reconciled.
Yeah, you're not very positive or optimistic on us coming back from this brink of polarity politically.
It doesn't seem like there's been a lot of evidence to support that.
Well, I'm not saying it's wrong. I don't know. I'm hoping that I don't know.
Me too.
But so politicization, so fatalism, politicization, number one, again, we've hit this, but is just misinformation. And
this is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, well, not just crazy, but I think growing up, I never thought that this would be a thing that I would have to combat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or wrestle with in my time.
Yeah.
Like, I just was all like, my mom used to make fun of me because I was a kid at 7 years old who we had a paper route. My parents did a paper route to kind of make some extra money, and there'd always be an extra paper or two. And so 7-year-old Zach would get the newspaper, and I would sit up like an old man, and I would be reading the newspaper. Does it surprise you?
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I wish you were weatherman. I'm just picturing that right now. And
what would my shtick be?
You'd be like, here was Zach, where the weather is never certain, but there's always a positive smile.
Something like that. We'll work on that. But my point is it was always like, okay, this is like the news, and this is what is you never question sources or what was said or different. And I just, not that I'm that old, but I've lived life, and it blows my mind that now everything that is talked about and seen.
Well, and
people have an angle or spin, or you just never know what's true.
Well, what's most unfortunate about that, when you look at politicization and misinformation, and we talk about, especially in our faith context, how those bleed over and overlap. I don't know if you remember this part, but it wasn't surprising, but it is sad. In a 2015 survey where the U.S., which is of any nation in the world, the most skeptical, even though scientists all over the world agree on the data, U.S. is the most skeptical. Within the population of the U.S., guess what the group was that scored the most likely to not believe in climate change?
White evangelicals?
White evangelicals. White evangelicals, in a 2015 survey, were the least likely to agree with scientists that there's climate change. So we just have to ask why that is. And we just have to be honest about the kind of things that we're pumping in and listening to, and the kind of sources and what all those sources might have to gain. And then the fourth one I wrote is just bad or incomplete theology. I think this book did. I mean, I had a feeling of kind of where he would go with some of his thoughts, but I was surprised at how robust. We tend to think, man, you're going to have to cherry pick to look at Scripture to try to make an argument for climate care. But I actually thought it was about as solid. I mean, care for creation runs from the first page of Scripture to the end. And when you really do look at the devastating effect already of climate change on food control, on supply, on farming, when you look at it on mining, when you look at it on
Can I list a few things?
Yeah.
So birds are migrating earlier, and their migration patterns are changing. Lobsters and other marine species are moving north. One article I read around the Keys in Florida right now, you know what the average temperature, ocean temperature has been? 95 degrees. Ugh. It's like a hot tub.
Wow.
That's how hot it's been. And it doesn't peak hot season for ocean temps in Florida is actually August. So it's not even at peak season yet. And even now, climatologists, zoologists, ocean biologists, they're sounding the warning that there's going to be a massive coral bleaching effect that's going to affect all the coral reefs off the coast of Florida. That's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen, because once the ocean temperature reaches a certain level, coral begins to bleach its natural, its algae and other sources in an attempt to stay alive. But that it kills.
Yeah. Well, but even now, I mean, when you look at what they say are directly climate-related disasters, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, where thousands of people lose their lives. When you look at the effect of the Antarctic and glaciers melting, when you look at all that, I mean, he just gives a really basic, to me, one of the best theological answers is, how do you love your neighbor well? And the way, and what's already happening and where we're going, one of the most practical ways to love your neighbor, and this is an interesting thing. This could be another reason why we don't think about as much here, is I didn't even think about this, but when you think about longitudinally and latitudinally where we are in the United States of America, another thing, even though right now we are experiencing the effects of climate change, the places that experience the most climate change are the places that are already economically the most impoverished and overlooked. So climate change right now, the dramatic peaking of it, or the dramatic effects of it currently, are at the extremes. They're at the poles or at the equator. So at the poles, you don't hear about it because almost no one lives there.
Correct.
Even though the effects are already catastrophic. And in the equator, that's where people are already impoverished, and it's only making it worse. And so we have an insulated twofold effect where we live. That, number one, even though it is affecting us, it's not affecting us as dramatically. And then number two, for the most part, those of us that live in the kind of latitude, longitude areas that we live in, we have the resources to combat it. Like I was reading about, there's several U.S. naval stations around America that the effects of climate change has destroyed their structures, but they have the resources to retrofit it. So they've gone back and literally retrofitted. I mean, those of us, it sucks when it's this hot, but most of us have the resources to just bump up the AC. It sucks when it's, but you take these places that is called, I think, climate inequity, where they're already at a disadvantage when it comes to resources. And then they're already at a disadvantage of how much climate change is hitting them already. And then on top of that, they don't have the resources to combat it. And I just think a lot of us, it's not us trying to be callous. We just don't know. We just don't know. And so a lot of people on a missionary front are going to these places to, number one, bring aid and relief and help. But number two, say, how can we not just talk to you about Jesus, but how do we, in the same way that a missionary would say, hey, we don't want to just tell them about Jesus, but leave their bellies empty. We would say, practically, how can we love our neighbor? I think it's pretty understandable and actually wise that a lot of people now are saying, how can we go and tell them we love them in a spiritual way, but also practically? And so I just think, theology, it's, he talks about Job. Job is almost a love letter from God to his creation. And you just see it all throughout. But this is another interesting one, not the last little theological thing, but his nuance between neos and kainos when it comes to the word new. So again, when we look at this whole fatalism thing of the Bible says it's going to be a new heaven and new earth. Well, number one, Randy Alcorn messed up my whole eschatology 15 years ago when he talked about the story of Scripture is primarily a story of restoration. He's restoring. Revelation ends with a new heaven and new earth coming down here. It's not us to fly away in the clouds one day. It's a restored earth. But there's two words for new in the Greek when it says a new heaven, new earth. There's neos, which means brand new, Like you don't have a car, then we give you a car.
Yep.
And the other word in Greek is kainos, which means like new. It means you have a house right now about 5 minutes away, and if one day you decide to renovate it,
Fixer upper.
yeah, it would. You would look back at your house and say it's like new. It's not brand new. You didn't destroy your old house. You renewed your old house, and that is the Greek word that the scripture writers use for a new earth.
Yeah.
It's not that God is just going to say that's a piece of garbage I'm going to get rid of and just snap my fingers and voila, there's something new. It's this continual thought of restoration. And if God is the one who created what we see in the world and he's the one that delighted in it, it just makes sense that it's going to be a restoration story from start to finish.
Right. No, it's so good and it's so true. And I think you did a good job of articulating in our conversation why people, I think, have a resistance
Yeah.
to climate change. But I think that brings us to kind of an important question. Maybe we should end on this question. Like, okay, so what do we do? Like, to use the words of John Tyson, who I love, what is our beautiful resistance?
Yeah.
Like, how do we, like, what does it mean to actually wrestle with questions about climate change and how we're supposed to live and how we're supposed to act? Like,
Yeah.
just off the top of your head, give me 1 or 2 thoughts.
Well, I'm going to just completely rip off what I heard Greta Vanberg say. Because I was curious, what would her number one thing be?
Yeah.
And Trevor Noah asked her, said, what would the number one thing that people should know? Because I think when you think of like, taking action, there's really 2 things. There's the personal and there's the political. A lot of this is governments and corporations and industries. Like she has chosen not to fly because of what the aviation industry does. I'm going to be honest. I love creation. I don't know if I'm ever going to go that extreme.
By the way, that's a reason. Denial, like that's probably another thing to add to the list of why people have a hard time with denying climate change.
Yeah,
is because they can't imagine a life without some of these, like flying, for example.
Yeah, it's true.
And we convince ourselves that because of that, then we're not really going to do that much about climate change.
Yeah.
Not to call you out.
No, no. I mean, there's certain things. I mean, there's a balance to everything, right?
There
is.
Like, yes. I'm going to keep flying too, for the record.
Yeah.
So
this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but I love what Greta said, especially since there's so much contention around the issue right now.
Yeah.
She said, if I could pick one thing to tell everybody to do, just one thing, is to educate yourself.
That's good.
Because and I don't know that sounds like a cop-out, but honestly, like when you think of, again, not to go into another controversial thing, but when you go back into 2020 and the race wars, I think the number one powerful starting place for a lot of people that had never considered a different point of view was just to educate themselves on it. And just to say, okay, like if I want to love my neighbor well, what's another angle I need to learn that I've never been open to? Yeah. What's something? So that's one of the things that I kind of want to do in this next season is educate myself a little bit more on it. And I think allowing those convictions to begin to filter into your worldview, your theological worldview, your political worldview, your cultural worldview. And I think you can't educate yourself and have a more textured worldview and that not seep into
the decisions you make,
the decisions you
operate,
make,
how you think, what you say.
Certain things that you may have never imagined that you would care about a candidate.
You would care.
You may end up caring. Because when you think about the future of your children and your grandchildren and the future of humanity, certain things might begin to matter to you.
Yeah.
That'd be the big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what about you?
Again, not to cop out, but I think educating yourself is good. Look, I think from a political perspective, we've got some stuff to work through. Okay. For example, there's a revolution right now. I feel like everyone's pushing electric cars. I don't know if we're quite ready as a society yet from an infrastructure. I feel like you've talked about that before on this podcast. Are we ready from an infrastructure standpoint to handle all electric cars? Maybe not. The price of this actually surprised people. I read this in my AI 2041 book. The price of solar and water and wind energy has continued to go down, because I feel like that's something you always hear is that the cost to convert to clean energy is so expensive it's not worth it. the cost is continuing to go down, but there's still more breakthroughs needed to continue to lower that cost to make it economical for us to switch over to that. So, I mean, all that stuff is stuff we need to continue to research, to look into. But I think the only way you're going to know about any of that stuff or what's going on is to educate yourself on what alternative methods there are.
Yeah.
What is achieving net zero carbon emissions actually mean?
Yeah.
What is what is the IPCC? Do you know what that stands for?
ICCP.
IPCC.
The International IPCC.
Yeah, IPCC.
International Pie Chart Corporation.
No.
Okay.
It is the UN International Governmental Panel on Climate Change.
I feel like none of those letters had anything to do with the letters you just mentioned.
IPCC. So they put out a report every year, and they're the ones who've said that we need to reduce our carbon emissions by this date, so that the global temperature of our global and goes up. So like educating yourself on what those numbers are, and what those things are, I think can make a big difference.
Can I tell you? So this on a personal level, I don't know if this is right or wrong or good or bad, but can I just tell you on a personal level why I actually care about this the most?
Tell me.
So and I because we don't have time to go into this, but I wrote down, this will not surprise you. I wrote down 4 reasons why I think we should care. 1, because we care about what God cares about. We care about creation. Number 2, because we value the future. Number 3, because it's a very practical way to love our neighbor. But number 4, as much as I care about the future of humanity, this actually might be the most important to me. Number 4, because I actually think it's a good witness. I am tired of having family members and friends that I love, that I want to see come into a life-changing relationship with Jesus, who can't understand why people who claim to follow Jesus and value humanity and love the future could care less about certain things or support destructive things. And I think it's a really poor witness when the people who claim to follow Jesus have a reputation as the people who trash the earth and don't care if they trash the earth.
Yeah.
And one of the things I resonate the most with him in this is I actually think in the future, one of the best ways that Christians are going to have a witness in the world that actually shines. I think the days of handing out tracts
stories about evangelism made me laugh.
Yeah, it's stories about evangelism.
I resonated with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Handing out tracts in public, that may not win somebody to Jesus, but when you can step out of your political cultural bubble and show that you're not just pro-life when it comes to abortion, but you have a value for life from conception to the grave, and that you care about people in every walk of life, and that you care about the unborn, and you care about the immigrant, and you care about women, and you care about minorities, and you care about people. I was going to say, and care about people on death row, but I don't want to open up another can of worms. And you care about the environment. I think when we can have a more holistic Christianity, that in my view looks more like Jesus and more like the holistic story that Scripture tells, I think that actually ends up becoming a good witness.
Yeah.
And I think on like my personal secret reason I even care about this to the extent that I do, revolves a lot around that.
Yeah.
I want people that follow Jesus to have a better witness in the world.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yeah.
You mentioned the verse in Romans earlier. I just want to read it because I think it adds so much, another layer to what you just said from a witness. But it's Romans 1 verse 20. Paul says, "For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, and divine nature." I think when we don't take care of our earth and if we don't steward it well, not only are we missing out on a chance to witness to other people in the way that you said, but I think there's people who that we might even reach, or that we might even have conversations with, that through the power and the glory and the splendor of creation, and when you see, I don't care who you are, when you see a beautiful sunset, there's something inside of you that just is stirred.
Yeah, it's good.
When you see a gorgeous mountain or a forest or something, like there's something inside of you that is just stirred and moved by that. And I think that we often forget about too, that there's people who need the reflection and the glory of creation to be able to see that and have their hearts moved. So not only I think is it a good witness to other people, but I think it's just a good witness for all of humanity.
It's a great insight. I love that. It's a good place to close.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of the conversation.
It's a lot of fun.
It's good. I think both of us are about halfway through. Maybe when we finish the book,
Yep.
come back for round 2. We'll probably wait for Pastor Tim because I know he'll be eager to jump back into this conversation.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about 99% of scientists agree on climate change and different things like that. But we don't live in a bubble, that there are people who have different thoughts or opinions, different things like that. If you have thoughts or articles or books or things that you want us to send in, to process, to consider when it comes to this, please send them in. We'd love to see them, love to engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think those are important for us to process and read through as well.
Absolutely. It's a good thought. All right. Hey, until next time, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the X Podcast. We would love it if you took the time to leave a review. If you've never left a review, would mean a whole lot. You can do that on Apple or Spotify. And enjoy this. Share this with somebody that you think it might be a provocative conversation and a conversation starter. Until next time, we will see you next week.